You all ever notice how the bush gets quiet at night? I don't mean peaceful quiet. I don't mean the sort of quiet you get when the wind dies down and the birds tuck themselves away. I mean that heavy kind of quiet. The kind that makes you stop talking halfway through a sentence because something in your bones tells you the world is listening. That's how it was out near Booie. Now, most folks who never been there won't know Booie. It ain't a city. It ain't the sort of place that shows up big on a map. Booie sits up in Queensland, not far from Kingaroy, where the country rolls dry and dusty, and the trees stand thin and crooked under a hard sun. Back in 1954, it was even quieter than it is now. Farms, scrub, gullies, caves, old tracks, and families who knew everybody else's business before lunchtime. People worked hard out there. They didn't scare easy. That's important to remember. Because when people from a place like that start whispering about a monster, they don't do it for fun. The story I'm about to tell you was passed to me by an old fellow who claimed he knew one of the boys involved. He told it with his eyes fixed on the ground, like he was reading it off the dirt. And when he got to the end, he said, "Laugh if you like." Everyone did. But those boys didn't laugh. Not after. This happened in 1954. 3 boys had gone out near a cave on a grazier's property around Booie. That much is part of the old reports. 3 teenagers. A cave. A thing covered in gray hair. Some said it stood like a man. Some said it had a tail that dragged near the ground. Some said it growled before it chased them. Later, armed bushmen searched the area and found nothing. Some people figured it was just a big old kangaroo mistaken in a panic. Maybe, but I'm going to tell it how it was told to me, and you can decide for yourselves. The boys were named Tommy, Les, and Arthur. At least that's what the old man called them. Tommy was the loud one. Every group has one. Always first through a fence, first up a tree, first to throw a stone at something he had no business bothering. Les was smaller, nervous, but loyal. Arthur was the oldest, 15, and because of that he acted like he was 40. He carried a pocket knife and spoke in short sentences, as though too many words might cost him money. It was late afternoon when they went out there. The sun was sliding down, turning the grass the color of old straw. The air smelled of dust, gum leaves, and warm cattle. They weren't supposed to be near that cave, but boys in those days treated "not supposed to" as a suggestion. They'd heard stories about it. Every little town has a place like that. A hollow, a ruin, a bend in the creek, a cave that kids dare each other to enter. This cave sat low in a rocky slope, half hidden by scrub. Nothing grand, nothing you'd travel to see. Just a dark mouth in the earth, with loose stones around it and flies gathering where the shade began. Tommy had brought a torch, not a good one. One of those old battery torches that worked only when it felt like it. Arthur had matches. Les had nothing but second thoughts. "Come on," Tommy said, standing at the cave mouth. "You scared?" Les didn't answer. That was answer enough. Arthur looked at the opening and frowned. "Smells bad." Tommy grinned. "Maybe there's treasure." "There's no treasure in Booie," Arthur said. Then bones. "That ain't better." The cave breathed cool air at them. That was how Les described it later. Not wind. Breath. Cold, stale, and carrying a rotten animal smell from somewhere deep inside. The boys stood there longer than they meant to. Because the thing about dark holes is this. Part of you wants to look inside, and another part of you knows that looking is how trouble begins. Tommy clicked on the torch. A weak yellow beam stretched into the cave and showed rough stone, dirt, and a scatter of dry leaves blown in from outside. Nothing moved. "See?" Tommy said. "Empty." He stepped in. Arthur followed. Les stayed outside until both of them called him chicken, which is how many a boy has walked into danger since the world began. Inside, the cave narrowed quick. They had to duck their heads and move sideways past a shoulder of rock. The torchlight bounced and shook. Their boots scraped. Somewhere water dripped, though nobody remembered seeing any water. About 20 feet in, they found the first strange thing. A wall of sticks. Not a natural pile. Not branches washed in by rain. These sticks had been wedged together across a side hollow, almost like someone or something had tried to block off part of the cave. Arthur crouched and touched one. "Don't," Les whispered. Arthur looked back. "It's sticks." "Then why are they there?" Tommy pushed past them and kicked at the pile. A few branches cracked and fell inward. That smell came out stronger. Wet fur, old meat, and something else. Something sour and musky that made all three boys cover their noses. Tommy stopped smiling. The torch flickered. Arthur said, "We should go." "Now, when the responsible one says it's time to go, you go." But Tommy, being Tommy, lifted the torch and shined it through the hole he'd made in the sticks. For a second, nobody breathed. The light caught hair. Long, dull, gray hair. Not a possum. Not a dog. Not a wallaby curled up in the shadows. Hair hanging from something big. Then the thing moved, just a little. A slow rise and fall, like breathing. Les made a noise in his throat. Not quite a scream. More like his body tried to scream, but forgot how. Tommy backed up so fast he stepped on Arthur's boot. The torch beam jerked upward, and two eyes opened in the dark. Now, eyes in torchlight can play tricks. Any farmer will tell you that. A cow can look like a ghost. A fox can look like a devil. But these eyes were high. Too high for a dog. Too far apart for a cat. And they didn't flash and vanish like an animal startled by light. They stared. Arthur grabbed Tommy by the shirt. "Move!" But before they could turn, something inside that blocked off hollow let out a growl. Not a bark, not a snarl. A low, rolling sound that filled the cave and pressed against their chests. The sticks exploded outward. The boys ran. They didn't run brave. They didn't run laughing. They ran like prey. Behind them came a crash of branches, claws, or feet striking stone, and another growl, louder this time, angry and close. Tommy dropped the torch. That was the worst part. The cave went black. All they had was the small gray square of daylight ahead and the sound of something coming after them. Arthur hit the narrow section first and slammed his shoulder into rock. Les crashed into him. Tommy screamed at them both to move. For a few seconds they were tangled there, three boys trapped in the throat of the cave while something big scraped and thudded behind them. Then Arthur forced through. Les followed. Tommy came last. He said later he felt something brush the back of his shirt. Not grab it, brush it, like fingers. They burst out into the late afternoon light and scattered down the slope, slipping on loose stones. Tommy fell hard and tore both knees open. Les tried to pull him up, but Tommy shoved him and screamed, "Run!" That was when Arthur looked back. He said the thing was standing at the cave mouth. Standing. That word mattered to him. Not crouched, not hopping, not leaning. Standing. It was tall as a man, maybe taller because of the slope, covered in dull gray hair from head to foot. Its arms hung long, its chest looked narrow, and behind it, dragging or swaying, was something like a tail reaching toward the ground. Its face was the part Arthur could never explain, because he only saw it for a second. But he said it was not the face of a kangaroo. The thing opened its mouth, and it growled again. Then it came down the slope after them. Now, you have to picture three boys sprinting through dry Queensland scrub at sunset. Branches whipping their faces, burrs catching their socks, lungs burning, and behind them this crashing sound like a sack of bones and wet hides being thrown through the trees. They didn't look back again. Not until they reached a fence. Arthur went over first. Les squeezed through the wires. Tommy tried to climb, slipped, and caught his shirt on a barb. And that's when he saw it. The thing had stopped maybe 30 yards back. It stood partly hidden between two trees. The sun was behind it now, so Tommy couldn't see details. Only the shape. Upright, broad at the shoulders, hair moving in the breeze. And that tail, long and wrong. It watched them. Tommy tore loose from the fence and left a piece of his shirt hanging there like a surrender flag. The boys ran all the way to the nearest house. By the time they got there, they were crying, bleeding, and talking over each other so badly the adults thought there had been a snake bite or a mad bull. When they finally got the story out, nobody believed them. Not at first, because boys tell stories. Boys exaggerate. Boys see shadows and turn them into monsters. But these boys were not proud of the story. That's what changed people's minds. They didn't brag. They didn't want to take anyone back there. They didn't dare each other to return. Tommy, the loud one, wouldn't even sleep with the window open for weeks after, and word spread fast. By the next day, Booie was buzzing. A monster in a cave. 3 boys chased. Gray hair. 2 legs. A tail. Some laughed and called it nonsense. Some said it was a kangaroo. A big old buck disturbed in the shade. And maybe that's all it was. An old man kangaroo can stand tall. Taller than you'd expect. They can growl. They can look strange in poor light. But then the search party went out. Men from that country knew kangaroos. They knew dogs, pigs, cattle, dingoes, every ordinary thing that moved through the scrub. Some of them went armed because even if they didn't believe in monsters, they believed in not being fools. They found the cave. They found disturbed dirt near the mouth. They found the broken stick barrier inside. They found Tommy's torn cloth on the fence. But they did not find the creature. No carcass, no nest, no clear tracks, no answer. The newspaper men had their fun with it. Kingaroy was already known for peanuts, and one article joked about the district going nuts over the monster. That's how towns protect themselves from fear, you see. They make a joke out of it. They give it a funny name. They say, "Hooey to the monster of Booie," and laugh over tea. But laughter doesn't always mean disbelief. Sometimes it means people are trying not to listen too closely. Because strange things kept happening for a little while after. Cattle wouldn't graze near that slope. A dog belonging to a nearby farmer refused to leave the veranda after dark. Just sat there whining toward the hills. One woman claimed she heard a deep growling outside her wash house 2 nights after the boy's story spread. Her husband went out with a lantern and found nothing but a smell like wet wool and rotten leaves. Another man said he saw something cross the road near dusk, too quick for a proper look, too upright for comfort. Were those real sightings, or just fear walking around in people's heads? Hard to say. Fear can grow legs if enough people feed it. But here's the part the old man told me that I never saw written anywhere. He said Arthur went back, not the next day, not with the searchers. Later, maybe 2 weeks after, he went alone. That doesn't sound smart, and it wasn't. But Arthur had been carrying shame around with him. People had started teasing them at school. Boys who hadn't been there called them cowards. Men at the store chuckled when they walked in. Tommy got angry. Les got quiet. Arthur got determined. He wanted proof. So one afternoon, when the sky was thick with storm clouds and the air smelled like rain, Arthur took his father's old lantern and went back toward the cave. He didn't plan to go inside. That's what he told himself. Just close enough to see. Close enough to maybe find hair caught on the rocks. A footprint. Anything. The bush was restless that day. Wind moving through dry grass. Magpies calling. Thunder muttering far away. Arthur reached the fence first. The scrap of Tommy's shirt was gone. That bothered him. Maybe the wind had taken it. Maybe an animal. Maybe one of the searchers. Still, it bothered him. He climbed through and made his way up the slope. The cave waited ahead, black and still. He lifted the lantern. "Just a cave," he whispered, but his voice sounded small. As he got closer, he noticed something lying near the entrance. The torch. Tommy's torch, the one he'd dropped inside. Only now it was outside the cave, placed on a flat stone. Not thrown, not washed out, placed. Arthur stared at it for a long time. The storm clouds rolled overhead, and the light dimmed. He told himself one of the men must have found it during the search and left it there. But why? Why not bring it back? Why set it on that stone like bait? Arthur picked it up. The glass was cracked. Dirt clogged the switch. He turned it over in his hands. That's when he heard breathing. From inside the cave. Slow, wet, patient. Arthur froze. The cave mouth was only 10 feet away. The lantern flame shivered. Something shifted in the dark. Arthur wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't listen. Every part of him had gone cold except his heart, which hammered so hard he thought whatever was in there must hear it. Then a shape leaned forward from the darkness. Not all the way out, just enough for the lantern to touch gray hair. Arthur dropped the torch. The thing inside made a sound. Not a growl this time. Something worse. A low clicking noise, like stones tapping together. Arthur backed down the slope one step at a time. The thing did not chase him. It only watched. He made it halfway to the fence before he turned and ran. When he got home, he told no one. Not his father, not Tommy, not Les, nobody. Years later, when he was grown and had children of his own, he told the old fellow who told me, just once, after a few drinks and a long silence. The old fellow asked him, "Why didn't it chase you the second time?" Arthur said, "Because it knew I'd come alone." Now I don't know what the Booie Monster was. Maybe it was a kangaroo. Maybe 3 frightened boys saw an ordinary animal in a bad place at a bad angle and turned it into something impossible. That happens. It really does. But I've seen kangaroos. I've seen big ones stand in the half-light like men who forgot how to speak. And I'll admit, if one came crashing out of a cave, growling, with the shadows hanging off it, I might run too. But there's one thing that keeps me from settling on that explanation. Kangaroos don't build stick walls inside caves, and they don't place torches on stones. So when you're out in the bush and you come across a cave with a mouth too dark for daylight to enter, do yourself a kindness. Don't throw rocks in. Don't shine a light too deep. And if the air coming out smells like wet fur and old meat, walk away. Because some things don't need to be proven. Some things only need to be left alone.